Welcome back to Riot Shooting Podcast on this beautiful 17th of February. Today we're going to be talking about confidence. We can all see how increased confidence can lead to higher scores, but where does confidence come from? How can we increase it and be more sure of ourselves and our abilities in the sport? Now, if you haven't listened to the episode I did last month on self-image, that's going to be a great place to start, as confidence is intricately intertwined with self-image. In fact, confidence and self-image are so much hand in hand that they're almost the same thing. The more confidence you have, the greater your self-image is. Now, you'll remember that from that episode that self-image is really the thing that allows you to compete at a high level and win competitions. It's a thing that lets you really use the physical skills you've worked so hard to develop and practice. And without confidence, you're going to have a low self-image, and you won't be able to compete well. Nobody who's ever won a big match did it without confidence. Without the confidence that they could win it, or at least that doesn't happen very often. But confidence is just something you either have or you don't have, right? Like, there are confident people, and there are people who just aren't confident. Well, no, not quite. The way I look at it is that there are cocky people and non-cocky people, and being cocky is a lot different than being confident. Confidence is something that you kind of earn for yourself and develop over time, whereas cockiness is an attribute that normally describes people who act and feel like they're the best when really they aren't all that good. Either that or they are good and they just act like jerks about it. But in general, I would say that no, people are not born confident or unconfident, but it's rather something you can develop over time. So now that we have that difference out of the way, let's talk for a minute about what exactly it is that confidence is going to do for you before we get into how to grow it. So confidence in our shooting allows us to trust ourselves rather than second-guessing our abilities. Now think about it. What happens if we second guess how good our hold is or how good our triggering is? Well, in the match, we're going to start to try and consciously focus on those things to be extra careful. And we know how that works too. We can only consciously focus on one thing at a time, and when we start to do that, we start jumping from step to step of our shot process and try to consciously pull the trigger when the sights are in the middle. We're taking the power away from our subconscious mind, which is where our skills are, and which is really good at doing a bunch of things at once really well. And we're trying to make our conscious mind handle all of it, which it just can't do under any circumstances. However, when we're confident that we know how to shoot, it is much, much easier to trust ourselves, and when we trust ourselves and we trust our abilities, we're much better able to allow our subconscious to shoot the match for us, as opposed to trying to take over with our conscious mind in order to be extra careful, like I said before. This whole confidence issue becomes more and more important the more stressful a competition scenario becomes. Now, I don't think I've told this story on the show before, but I've got a pretty good one here that illustrates this point pretty well. So, a couple years ago, I think 2014, I got to shoot at the ISSF World Championships for rifle, which was held in Spain. Now, this story doesn't actually come from that match, but it comes from the qualification match that was used to select the team. The selection procedure for making that World Championship team, in this case for air rifle, was pretty similar to what we're doing for the Olympics this year. There were 3 slots available for the open men's air rifle team, and it was selected for over the course of multiple days and multiple finals. I think it was 3 days of matches with a final each day. So we were down in Fort Benning, Georgia for these 3 days of matches, and it turns out that after 3 days and 3 finals, I was exactly tied to the 10th of a point with another very good air rifle shooter for the 3rd position on the team. It was almost like something out of a dramatic movie, But there we were, standing on the finals range right after we finished that 3rd final, and now the staff and range officers are trying to look through the rules and the match program and everything to try and figure out, okay, well, what happens when 2 competitors are exactly tied for the last position on the team? Do we look at total X count? Do we look at the last shot in the final? Do we look at just the last final? Do we have to shoot a whole another final? Do we shoot one shoot-off shot? What happens? Because, it's basically never happens. Well, first they tell us, okay, stay on the line. You're gonna have to shoot one more shoot-off shot. One shot. Well, then a couple seconds later, it was kind of like, oh, wait, we were wrong. You actually have to shoot a whole nother final to determine who makes it, and it's going to start like right now. And then finally, they made the final determination, which was in 1 hour, you're going to shoot another 20-shot final against each other, and whoever wins that final gets the third place on the team. Okay, so now there I am. I have 1 hour to sit around and think about this before I shoot this final. That's kind of a terrifying thought, right? Kind of a horror scenario in terms of shooting. Anyway, I have 1 hour before I have to shoot this final against another, really good air rifle shooter who's a couple years older than me, has a bit more experience than I do, and I know that I have to win in order to make the U.S. World Championship team, which is pretty much, it's, almost as important of a competition as the Olympics in the shooting sports, which makes this probably the most high-intensity situation I've ever been in my shooting career so far, especially since making this team was a big goal for me that I'd been preparing for a long time. So, during my 1 hour wait, I, of course, first realized that I need to remain positive. I knew that as soon as I started to focus on the pressure, or as soon as I would start to let myself worry, that it would negatively impact my performance, and I would probably lose. So, what was the best strategic thing I could do, or that I could think of to do at the time? Well, first I walked out of the range and down the road there, away from the range a little ways, and I called my dad. My dad's always been heavily involved in my shooting, and probably has more confidence in my shooting abilities than I do, or did. So I knew that talking to him would at the very least give me a distraction from the feeling of pressure, and at best, help me get into the best, most confident frame of mind that I could be in. So I talked to him for 20 minutes or so, and he helped me run through what was going to happen and what I was going to do, and we talked about some past successes, and then I hung up and made my way back to the range. Kept my mind busy from that time forward by going through all my equipment, making sure everything was there, stretching, getting water, refilling my air cylinder, talking to people about things not related to shooting, finding things to laugh about to keep my spirits up and anxiety down, things like that. Then the hour was up, and it came time to shoot this full final against this other competitor, and to be honest, because I went into it feeling confident in my abilities to perform under pressure and my ability to shoot finals and to shoot good shots, I didn't feel all that much pressure and was able to shoot a pretty decent final, especially considering the circumstances, and I earned my place on that team. I really think that the confidence I had is what enabled me to trust in myself and my abilities and allow my subconscious mind to shoot those shots and not try to take over with my conscious mind, which is ultimately what got me that win. So once you have that technical skill, it pretty much all comes down to confidence and self-image. Alright, so where does confidence come from, and how can we take what we learn about where it comes from to build our own confidence and to grow our self-image? Well, let's think for a moment about what I said I did during my 1 hour break there in that last story. I specifically said that I went over some of the things I'd done in the past that were successes. Now, I would say for you to even go as far as to make a Word document on your computer or have a page in your diary that you write down the successes you've had in the past. Maybe you shot a really good record day. Write it down. Maybe you shot a really good practice final, or even just won a practice final without shooting that great of a score. Still counts as a win, which means it can still boost your confidence, so write it down. Maybe you had a personal best at a match. Write that down. Everything you can think of that you consider a success, write it down and keep it up like a log of your successes. Then review it. The more often you review those successes and relive in your mind as in-depth as you can the exact course of events there, the more you're going to be able to boost your confidence. You're going to be better at seeing yourself as the shooter who is capable of doing those things and who normally does those things, and the more you make yourself see yourself as that way, then the more you're going to embody that success and the more your confidence is going to grow. Another thing that confidence comes from is your training. Now, not necessarily like a score you shoot in practice. We just covered that, and this is a different idea, but I mean just the actual practice you do. If you go to a match and you look back at your preparation and say, I've put as much effort into my practice as I could, and I'm as ready as I can be, well, you're not going to be nearly as anxious as if you know you haven't really done that much in practice. So, just the fact that you've gone to the range and put in hours is one way to build your confidence. One way that I use this to help me and how I keep a constant reminder of it is that I have a whole bunch of those sticker wraps that come on air rifle tins, I have those wrapped around the base of my offhand stand. There's something like 50 of those things wrapped around there, all from tins of pellets that I've shot and that I've collected over a couple years worth of training. And basically, if you add it all up, it comes up to representing something like 25,000 pellets that I've shot in practice, just in those tins alone. And yeah, and those aren't even all of the tins of pellets I've shot. So I can just look down at the base of my offhand stand while I'm standing there in position and be like, oh yeah, that's right, I've shot over 25,000 pellets in practice, and anybody who shot that much has a pretty damn good idea of what he's doing. So there's a good confidence booster right there. Another confidence booster that comes from practice is just knowing you've done certain specific exercises. For example, last shots. The way I look at it, you can practice last shots in two different ways. Either you can take the approach of, I will always finish shooting with a 10, and so you say, alright, this is my last shot, and you shoot it, and if it's a 10, you're done, and if it's not a 10, then you just shoot shots until you shoot a 10, and then you're done. That way you can tell yourself truthfully that you always shoot 10s on your last shot. The other way you can approach it, and the way I much prefer personally to do it, is that once you get to the end of your practice, you say, this is my last shot, and then you shoot that shot, and you're done no matter what, just like a real last shot in your match. If it's a 10, great. If it's not a 10, well, then it wasn't a 10, but you have to be done anyway. You might not shoot a 10 every single time on your last shot in practice, but when you get to the match, you're going to be able to say to yourself that you've practiced real last shots at every single practice, and even if you didn't shoot a 10 every time, you put yourself in that real situation of shooting that last shot in every practice, and you're used to it, as opposed to somebody who uses the first option, and yeah, they end up with a 10 at the end of every session, but basically they cheated to get to it. So that gives me a pretty big confidence boost as well. Plus, I think in terms of this specific skill, it just makes you better at shooting last shots. So I would say that those two things are the biggest influencers of confidence: keeping track of your successes and reviewing them often, and considering what it is you've done in practice and the effort that you have put in. That's really about it. Aside from that, really try to limit any negative thoughts. You can do critical analysis about what it is you need to work on the most and what it is you need to improve on, but you can't ever say to yourself that you're bad at any specific thing. You have to phrase it in a positive, or at the very least a neutral way. Otherwise, your confidence and self-image takes a big hit, and the more that happens, the more difficult it becomes to shoot good scores. Confidence, guys. It's what makes a difference. Always work to build that confidence and grow that self-image. I hope you found today's episode helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please send me an email at olympicshootingpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to get back to you. And if you would like to donate to support the show and to support me in my pursuit of the 2016 Olympic team, please go to paypal.me/Ryan's Shooting Podcast with no spaces or punctuation, and you'll be prompted to do just that. Thank you very much, and I will talk to you all next week.